From the Toronto Star, I'm Adrian Shung.
I'm Raji Mudder, and this matters. Sports was one of the first big losers of this pandemic. It was the canary in the coal mine that let us know our world is radically changing.
And it continues to be a signal for all of us for how this fight against the coronavirus is going and whether we're any closer to getting back to normal.
The NHL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and soccer leagues all across Europe are at a standstill.
And after months of speculation, the Summer Olympics in Tokyo is being postponed until next year.
We agreed to postpone the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 to 21, latest summer 21.
So today, we're talking about sports. It's more than just a pastime. It's how we unite. Our passion as fans is one of the biggest ways that we celebrate together.
First up, we hear from someone who knows a little something about what it means to represent your country at the Olympics, and someone who's been banging the drum and putting the pressure on the IOC to put the games on pause this year.
Coming into the middle, in the slot, shot, rebound, Wickenheiser scores!
She's one of the most decorated Canadian Olympians of all time, winner of 4 gold medals with the Canadian national women's hockey team. And if that wasn't enough, she's now in medical school studying to be a doctor on the front lines of our emergency rooms. She's the GOAT, Hayley Wickenheiser.
And for the second part of our episode, we'll talk to Star Sports columnist Bruce Arthur, who has covered several Olympics and all other sports over his long and award-winning career.
We're talking to 5-time Olympic medal winner Hayley Wickenheiser. Hayley, thanks for making the time to talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So first off, it's the decision that you've been calling on for some time now. What did you think when the IOC finally made the call to postpone the games?
I was just sort of thought, okay, relief. Okay, good, because it's the right decision. It's the decision that anyone who could see this thing from a global perspective could see had to happen, I think. And in the timeline that was needed so that athletes around the world now have time on their side to be able to take a step back, to get healthy, to train, to be with their loved ones, and to regroup before going into the Olympic Games next year.
Hayley, knowing what public health officials say of how long self-isolation measures will happen, did you ever think the Olympics could have been held on time?
No, not after the public pressure that ensued. I think that was the key. I think had, people not have spoken up and pressure had not been mounting, I'm sure we would still be in the same situation with the IOC. They would be looking to drag this out a little longer to see how far they could get before having to make a decision. But that just wasn't going to be acceptable for, athletes and sport leaders around the world who know what it's like every day to be an athlete training for the games and not having any direction. The Olympics maybe happen every 4 years, but for an athlete, they happen every single day. There's athletes just weren't able to train. And as the virus traveled through the world, more and more countries were getting hammered and speaking up. So, I think my voice and Canada's voice was the first, but there were many more on their way. I'm glad it happened the way it did.
You were one of the first athletes to really speak out on the idea that the games should be postponed. You tweeted a longer, thoughtful message about it. Why did you feel you needed to step up in that moment?
Because I was living it with my own eyes in emergency rooms every day. And, being on the front lines up until this week when they pulled all the trainees out of the hospitals, I was not directly seeing COVID patients, but I was seeing COVID patients coming into the hospital on increasing numbers. I was watching the doctors that I was working with debate on how to manage these patients, feeling very unsafe and uneasy without proper protective gear. I was seeing people being intubated for this. And, just listening and observing, I could feel that this thing is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. And so that essentially really sort of using my medical experience provided with my sport experience and knowing that now all the pools are shut down, all the tracks are shut down. I'm like, there's just no way this thing is going to happen in 4 months. I actually called about 15 of my friends who are either ICU or emerge docs across Canada and asked them what they thought. And every single one of them said there's no chance. And then talking to athletes, I think there was a growing concern and stress about, what was going on as well. So just all of that put together. Yeah.
I think that's so interesting too, is because you have a different perspective on this, not just as an athlete, but as a doctor in training. Again, you've seen already on the front lines how much work there is being done and how much more there is to come, right?
Yeah, I think we're just in the beginning here in Canada. We're starting to see the surge now, and this thing is only going to get worse before it gets better. And so to put athletes at peril also puts other people at risk. So, and I knew, being an athlete myself, that if I was an athlete in that position, I'd be doing whatever it took to keep training without putting other people at risk. But I'd be pushing every boundary possible because I would be stressed that I'd have to perform at my best in 4 months. So it was a totally unfair situation to put athletes through. And I think in the end, reason and rational thinking and on the part of Canada first, and then everyone else following wins. And now the IOC will do the right thing. I think it's also bought them a little bit of time, and whatever pressure they needed to have happened. And here we are.
As an athlete, what was running through your mind when you knew that athletes were going to miss out on this massive opportunity of the games?
Just how I would feel, the heartbreak, the devastation, the turmoil of knowing that it's probably the right thing, but wishing it wasn't reality. It's a grief. It's like you're mourning the loss of a loved one in a way. Your loved one is your craft, which you've been trying to master for however many years. And then you're now faced with this horrible situation where, it's the best interest of not only the sporting community, but the world to put your dreams on hold. I'm really proud of the way the athletes have handled this. There was very little pushback, if any, when the facts were laid out, the medical facts were laid out. It's just very hard to deny that is the reality of where we're at. And it's a no-win situation, but this is, I think, the best case scenario given the worst case of what's happening.
What do you make of this idea that the Canadian Olympic Committee and Canada at large was really the one leading the way here? They told the IOC, we're not sending our athletes to Tokyo this summer. What do you think of that idea that Canada was a world leader here?
I think that that's absolutely true. And that's fact. I think that Canada was and is the world leader here in every way with this. And usually we are. People may not know all the ins and outs of what the Russian doping scenario, but it was also Canada. It's also been Becky Scott, who's been fighting the good fight for years. It was also Tricia Smith at the IOC level. And I was a part of those conversations as well, sitting down with IOC leadership saying, this can't continue the way it is. And I think Canada just has a really good moral and ethical compass when it comes to things in sport and doing what's right. I think we are a team player. We care about more countries and things than ourselves. As a leadership with the Canadian Olympic Committee and the COC Athletes Commission, what they ended up deciding was 100% the catalyst for what has happened here. It was probably going to come no matter what, but
right.
This push it over the top.
You were talking about just the preparation standpoint for athletes, and until they handed down this decision that if you were training for the games, that you would be pushing every boundary that you could to be prepared. At this point, what do you feel is the best way for athletes to stay creative or mentally checked in, because they've been sprinting up to this moment, right?
Yeah, I think now is just time to step back, regroup with your coaches, your teams, your psychologists, your physiologists, like everyone has a team around them. Take a second, take a week, step back, reevaluate, get a plan in place that's likely looking at July, probably sometime in that time frame. You've got time, keep doing what you're doing, get enough rest, and make sure you take care of your family and get your health in check first. But there's no panic now. There's no panic. I know this is going to end some athletes' career. I know this is not going to be a big deal for others, but we have to all adapt, and it sucks all around, but it is the only option that exists right now.
Hayley, I just wanted to circle back to your training in medicine. A lot of Canadians are seeing the work of doctors and nurses, of them putting their lives on the line for us. Does seeing the work that they're doing, the work that you've done, does it give you an even bigger push to want to be on the front lines?
Yeah, I've always loved emergency medicine. I've been in emergency rooms for the last 4 or 5 years, doing a lot of shadowing, a lot of after games that I played with the national team for years, I would go in and work with one of my friends in Emerge Doc, and I would shadow her and see what she was doing, because I was doing a master's degree at the University of Calgary, so I was able to do that. So my interest in emergency medicine has been for a very long time, and I've seen a lot, to be honest. So it gives me, I wish I could be more helpful in this time. I wish my training was further down the road, because I'd be right in there with everybody I know that we are in great hands. Every doctor I've worked with, and I mean every doctor I've worked with in the emergency room, in my experience so far, has been terrific. And I know they're also worried. I know they also want people to stay home. I know they want people to stop stealing the PPE and the masks from the hospital so that they don't have to worry about where they're going to find an N95. And they also have a lot of, like what we were describing, talking to one of my friends yesterday, a lot of free floating anxiety around, just I could feel it in the hospital. There's this palpable anxiety of just what's to come. What are we facing? What are we bracing for? And that is why people just, if you think you're doing nothing, you're helping.
You mentioned that sports really is where we can go to for the best of this situation of people being resilient. You've represented Canada at 6 Olympic Games and all the great things that it stands for, of unity, of athletes giving it their all, that really it's a celebration of all of our countries. Do you think in a year's time, when hopefully all of this is over, that this is the biggest Olympic party we've ever seen in 2021?
Well, that's what I hope for. And that's what the point was, is why are we rushing something that people are going to go there? They're going to be not even recovered or still in the midst of this. It's going to be miserable. Let's wait and let's have a games that it will be the light at the end of that dark tunnel, as they've been talking about. And it will be truly a party for the world. And, I'm going to reschedule whatever my life looks like to be at those games, no matter what, because that's what I believe it'll be about. And I can't wait to see those athletes walk in. There's going to be a lot of emotion around that, I'm sure, for everyone. And it'll be something to be celebrated and to be followed. And the world will be watching, and the world is watching. And so it's up to us to do this thing the right way and keep advocating for what's best.
Hayley, thanks so much for taking the time to talk. This was great.
Okay, you're welcome.
And that's Hayley Wickenheiser, one of Canada's greatest Olympians, 4-time gold medal winner, doctor in training, and she says she'll be there for the Tokyo Games whenever they happen.
Up next, we have Bruce Arthur on the line to talk about how sports was the first sign something was deeply wrong and where we go from here. We're joined by Bruce Arthur, who you may know as the sports columnist for The Star, who is now actually a coronavirus columnist for The Star. Bruce, how are you doing today?
Roger, it's my pleasure, man.
Listen, I want to talk to you because even in the absence of sports, I think a lot of people are looking at athletes and how they're dealing with this virus. Because, if this is something that can bring some of the healthiest people in our society down, no, I think that really helped people take this seriously. Would you agree?
Well, the idea that people are invulnerable to this virus is like one of the scariest things about it, right? Some people don't understand how easy it is to transmit, how easy it is to get, and how it can be really damaging and even fatal no matter how old or young you are. I do think that sports had a huge part to play in making this a real serious issue. Look at it this way. Up until Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz tested positive for COVID-19, the night before I was at a Toronto Maple Leafs game, and I was writing about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they played the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that was a big deal because they were going to play Tampa in the first round. And when I say those words, that sounds like I am speaking to you from a distant world, right? This is like a movie where you discover historical documents about the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Blue Jays. Like, that stuff is old now, but at the time they were still playing. And the night that Rudy Gobert tests positive, there are other NBA and NHL games that get played to full arenas with 20,000 people in them, lining up at the bathrooms, going up to the concessions. And think about that in the context of what we know now, a little more than 2 weeks later. It is incredibly different. The entire world has changed. And up until the moment Rudy Gobert tests positive, from the time they halt the game to the time the NBA suspends their season, it's an hour and a half, 9:30 on a Wednesday night. By the next day, the NHL has suspended its season. MLB takes a little longer. Sports is gone in 2 days. In 2 days, it's gone. And once that happens, all the other things that have been happening already, like Washington State, bad things were starting to happen in Washington State already. We'd seen what was happening in Italy, what had happened in China, other countries, but it was local. And this became international. In North America, once that wallpaper of sports was taken away, it had changed everything. And the fact that Rudy Gobert was going to play in that game and that his teammate Donovan Mitchell was going to play in that game, had gone through warm-ups and felt healthy 5 days later and also tested positive for COVID-19. I honestly think that was one of the best ways to explain to people the most dangerous thing about this virus is that you don't know you've got it. Necessarily. People can transmit this while not having any symptoms whatsoever. And not only that, they can play in an NBA game I think that was huge.
I totally think that the NBA stopping was a huge wake-up call, but I do want to take one issue with your column about this, and that's, calling Utah Jazz center Rudy Gobert a hero, because I think that most NBA fans think of that guy as a bit of a jerk.
Well, of course you do if you love the NBA, because if he doesn't test positive, what happens? The next night, the NBA plays again, and maybe the next night until someone else pops, right? And we know that other athletes had it. Not only that, but the reason I think Rudy Gobert is a hero is he's an accidental idiot hero. Let's make that clear. You need to categorize what kind of hero he is, because he didn't take this seriously. He becomes an avatar in that moment. Rudy Gobert's an all-star. He is not the most famous basketball player in the world, but he's a 7-foot Frenchman, this incredible defensive player, and he touches all the microphones, right, in the room when he goes, once the NBA and all other leagues moved media 6 feet away, remember how ridiculous that was? So they moved him 6 feet away. He touched all the microphones that were on the table. And in the room, he was touching his teammates and touching their stuff and doing exactly what you're not supposed to do. And because he was so stupid about it, if he doesn't test positive, if he is more responsible, let's say, and we don't know exactly what happened, but let's assume that him being an idiot is part of what led him to contract the virus. If he doesn't do that, then the next night there's, 160,000 more people in arenas. Again, one person, there was a thing by Dr. Hugh Montgomery of the University College London where he talked about if you have the flu, by average you infect 1.3, 1.4 people. So once they each infect 1.3, 1.4, and it goes through 10 people, I am responsible for 14 cases of the flu. COVID-19 is so much more contagious that it's 3 people for every person. And because of the power of exponential numbers, by the time you've infected 3 people, and they have through 10 stages, it's 59,000 people. Rudy Gobert saved lives. I'll go to my grave saying that he was an idiot, but him being an idiot turned him into a hero. And someone pointed it out to me. He pulled a Homer. It's the old Homer Simpson thing where by accident you managed to do great societal good. That is the legacy of Rudy Gobert.
I do find that hard to disagree with. And the funny thing is that he's still leading in a way, because the most recent report is that he has lost his sense of smell, which right now is being publicized as a key symptom of this. I obviously do not want to wish ill on anyone, but as the reader of a sports columnist, I did just want to say something about that to you. I think the other thing that we have to talk about right now is the Olympics. This is a huge story. It was just announced that it was postponed. You wrote a month ago that the IOC has shown over and over what they care about and basically how they cannot be trusted. Before this, they announced they were putting together a 4-week decision date out there, but then Canada was the first team that pulled out, and it kind of popped that bubble. What do you think about the story and how they're basically forced to make this decision? Well,
think of it this way. Japan spent $26 billion getting ready for this Olympics. The broadcast rights are worth almost $6 billion. The Olympics is, and I think we all understand this at some point, they are selling the possibility of the human spirit, which is the greatest product on earth. But the people who run it, like the people who run soccer, are deeply cynical, deeply selfish, deeply greedy. And so I actually, when you go back and look at that column, I underestimated what this virus is, because I think we all did. I didn't realize it was going to get this big this fast. Again, I didn't understand exponential numbers. But the IOC waited as long as it could. And even once it got postponed, I think what we'll find out, I'm pretty sure about this, I talked to people about it yesterday, that the IOC only postponed after Japan postponed, because that way the IOC was covered in terms of insurance. Because whoever canceled it loses out on the insurance battle. I'm pretty sure that happened. The IOC always finds a way to stick the locals with the bill. But when it comes to what Canada did, it's insane to think that this could ever happen, like that they were ever going to do this. Think about everything we know about the coronavirus now. What the Olympics are is tens of thousands of people coming from literally every country in the world. Every one of them gets on a plane and flies, sometimes multiple flights, to Japan, where they would then ride the subways in Japan, where they would gather together in all those ways we talked about, lines, concessions, restaurants, bars. And by the way, the athletes of the world would be in a basically hermetically sealed environment in the athletes' village, where what do we hear every year, every 2 years? All the athletes do in there is train, eat McDonald's, and have sex. That's all they do. And then everyone would go back to literally every country in the world. You get one coronavirus spreader in there. If 10 people in the world had the virus a month before the Summer Olympics, and one of them went to the Olympics, it could literally be a way to infect everyone in the world. So there was no way this was going to happen. And the IOC still waited and waited and waited and waited. And I know it's hideously complicated. I know it's one of the most complicated things that humans do. But there was no way this was going to happen. So now Canada, I think, did the right thing, the courageous thing. And they talked to their athletes and they said, we're not going to go. And once they did that, things were already in motion. I was hearing some rumbles about it a couple days before. But Canada took the initiative. And Canada's tried to be a country of principle in international sports when it comes to doping, when it comes to some other things. And in this case, honestly, not holding the Olympics will save lives. They said they'll do it no later than next summer. I hope they're right. I hope the Olympics happen by the summer of 2021. So if they don't, that means the coronavirus is still among us. And to hold an Olympics responsibly, you need to make sure you're not going to spread this thing all over the world again. And it's going to be an enormously high bar to clear.
Bruce, I think, speaking as a sports fan, I miss them immensely right now. I have a bunch of free time on my hands. When do you think they are going to come back in some sort of normal way? Right now, I believe MLS is the one thing that has an actual date out in there. They are saying May 10th. They're hoping to try and resume things. What do you think? How long do you think we're in for this?
No chance. May 10th, I would bet every dollar I have, they're not playing on May 10th. The United States is about to be the most afflicted nation on earth with the coronavirus. I think that's where we are. If you look at all the numbers, look at the community spread that's happened unchecked, look at the lack of testing, look at the lack of federal response. The United States is going to be a nightmare, and it's going to be awful. If you think you could play soccer in 2 months, no chance. If you want sports back, the United States has to be healthy. And the United States is heading down the wrong road. Fall, maybe winter would be my guess. And even then, there's so many factors up in the air. I don't know how confident I feel about that. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the United States pulls this out. I think what's about to happen in the United States is just an unbelievable tragedy. And sports is going to be one of the things that gets sacrificed on the altar for that. We're living through history in a way that none of us have ever lived through it before. So it's really hard to figure out what's going to happen. None of us have anything to compare this to at any point in our lives, unless you're above 75, above 80, you lived through a world war. The only thing. Bruce, I want to thank you so much for your time. I really wish we were talking about the playoffs, but obviously there are some more important things going on, and I really, really want to thank you for your time today. We will talk about them again one day, my friend. That was Bruce Arthur, who is a Toronto Star sports columnist. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Rudy Gobert, Adrian Chung, and Saba Etisaz. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.